Hi, welcome to The Cultural Barrier. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
In this week's episode, we have a guest today, and we've got Counsellor Sahdaish Pall. We'll be talking about International Women's Day and the sort of change in culture, society, and what women have done, the successes and the sort of failures and the things that we need to look at in society. So firstly, Sahdaish, lovely to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us today.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you both. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, can you just explain who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into the meaty part of the topic itself.
Yeah, sure. So I wear a number of different hats. So as you said, you introduced me as counsellor. So I'm a counsellor in Sandwell, which is, for those that don't know where that is, that's in the West Midlands. We're next door to Birmingham and also next door to Wolverhampton and in between Walsall and so on. We're sort of like snugly in the middle of that.
You've got the best of all of the worlds in the West Midlands then, eh?
Exactly, yeah, we're right in the middle. I'm a director and founder of Kaur Lab CIC. It is a research, education and advocacy hub. And we set it up to help tackle harmful practices within the Sikh and South Asian communities, mainly to do with violence against women and girls. So I also run that. I do a lot of training and education. I've been doing this work for 30 years now. I think in April it'll be 30 years for me, having worked in the violence against women and girls sector. So I've done everything from starting out as a volunteer, but working in refuge provision, sort of with homelessness, outreach services, children safeguarding. I've sort of done the whole range of it, including here and there, done a lot of mental health, older people, working with disabilities. So I've sort of my work within violence against women and girls has been consistent, but you work, so people hand you like other projects to look after. So I've done a bit of that other work as well. So yeah, it's very varied, but again, it's very like sort of focused on people. My work has been, and yeah, so here we are today. My work is moving away slightly from crisis intervention now, which I've done, like I said, for 30 years, and moving more towards the sort of research and policy side. Yeah.
Our paths have crossed a few times in the past, because obviously we're changing since we have spoken about domestic abuse within the South Asian community previously, whether that was the online taboo talks that we did. But more recently, Taj has sort of called upon you for your services of help, because obviously we're developing our domestic abuse services within Swindon. And firstly, thank you very much, Sahdaish. Have to say that on camera as well, off, which we did do. Taj, in regards to why you contacted Sahdaish, because Sahdaish, like you've said, you've had so many roles. And like you said, as soon as you get into one thing, you end up doing 100 other things as well. And it's one of those sectors, isn't it, where you feel compelled, if nothing else. But Taj, if you could just let us know why Sahdaish was the person that you went to initially, that would be great.
Oh my God, this put me on the spot.
It is.
First of all, I think the most important thing was that you were so open and easy to talk to. And I thought, I'm going to approach her. And I think that's a really important thing, that you're not, okay, I'm doing my thing, you go and do yours. And I think that was the first and most important thing for me, that I knew that if I went to you, that you were going to support. And I think that's, yeah.
And that was the reason I didn't tell you to say that, but that talks really nice into the reason we're doing this episode, actually. So with International Women's Day, what should we be doing as women to support each other? How can we move forward and make sure that we just keep getting stronger? So Sahdaish, where do you think over the last maybe decade, what are the strengths of being a woman where we've actually got to those positions as South Asian women in society? What's changed?
I think from a South Asian perspective, I think women have realised, that they can push through that glass ceiling that everybody talks about. I've met women doing so many different, fantastic, fabulous, things that I would be thinking like, oh my God, how the hell have you achieved that? Not because I don't think women are capable, but, before historically, whether it's a career path or whether it's, climbing mountains, whatever it is, women have realized that actually the only thing stopping them is either themselves, because they've been taught all their lives that they shouldn't be doing certain things. Not that they can't, but they shouldn't. You're sort of boxed in. And you start to believe that because that's what you've been told by your parents and the people around you, your extended family or your community and so on. or the other aspect is sometimes, we are our own worst enemies. And as women, sometimes women aren't that supportive of women. And there is some level of toxicity around in the sector and wider, I'm sure. Obviously, I don't want to be part of that. I've always wanted to be supportive of other women. So I think if we support each other, we can achieve anything we want to, whether it is a career or I didn't go to university. Obviously my parents were like, no, you're not going to college, you're not going to university. I went back to education after I had my son, after I'd got married and after I'd had my son. And that's how I sort of developed and grew. And also,
Sahdaish, on that, because we picked up on two really important points, and I just want to explore both of those if we can. In that thing, from our experience, from my experience, I suppose, and Taj, because we've got the same parents, hopefully she agrees with me. That whole thing of being South Asian, we were never told that you shouldn't be doing it per se, but from the parents' perspective, it was a case of, well, actually do those things that just everyone else does, I suppose. So there was nothing, it's very much keeping it within that sort of box. I'm a very boxy person.
Right. And there was also always this thing of, when you get married, you can do whatever you want to.
Yeah.
When you get married, and it's like, I haven't done half the things that I was promised that I could do when I got married. So that was just a dream, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's priorities, isn't it? It's when you get married, other priorities take over, don't they? And so even if you want to, you're not able to, because you have to pick and choose in your 24 hours. What can you do?
And there are just 24 hours.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. And I just wanted to highlight that. I mean, I know from our parents' perspective, and I know it very much varies within the whole community, it was very much do what everyone else does because we want you to cover those things that you need to cover, which is why things like domestic abuse, trying to empower other people, was very much it was never even thought about for that generation above us. So that I'd like to get your thoughts on that firstly, just the pressures of the generation before us who perhaps didn't encourage us to do those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think our parents, they had similar difficulties, but maybe slightly different at the same time. When our parents came over, so I'm second generation, and when my parents came here, their focus was something else. Their focus was to settle in the UK. It was to work hard, to be able to purchase their own home, to make a living, to bring up their children and set them up. Do you know what I mean? That was their focus, wasn't it? So their focus was just work, 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 and that's how it was. And maybe in some cases, they're paying for that now with their health and so on. Because I know my mum and dad are not in the best of health. They're getting older now as well. And I guess they had other difficulties, but also things like abuse. And I'm not saying that was a case in my family. We lived quite a sheltered life in a little bubble. Our dad was very overprotective of us. But before I got married, didn't really see domestic abuse much in my family, my sort of extended family. But now when I look at it and I look back after I started working in the sector and understanding what this was after I got married, I started remembering things, the conversations, incidents, particularly in my wider family network. And I thought, okay, that's that was happening, that was going on at the time. Having, an aunt whose husband wouldn't let her, in the olden days, women used to sew from home, didn't they? They looked up after the children. They worked from home. The men would come and drop off stacks of fabric, didn't they?
We all lived the same lives, didn't we?
And you'd help, straightening collars and things like that. And we used to help out doing those sorts of things with one of my aunts. But he would do things my uncle would do things like switch the electricity off. He'd go to the main switch and he'd switch it off, and there'd be arguments. And I remember watching them, and we didn't really think much of it, maybe because it was quite normalized and we'd see it often happening. Now I look back and I think to myself, he wouldn't give her any money. So that was her income, and that's how she supported her children. And now I look back and I think, well, that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to financially control her. He didn't want her to be able to make that money, so she would.
These were normal things, isn't it?
Yeah,
as you're growing
exactly.
up, we saw this a lot. And we
Yeah.
thought this was normal behaviour. And
Exactly.
I think that's an issue in the community as well. We don't recognise what domestic abuse is.
Yeah.
As soon as you think of it, you think, okay, hitting someone, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I never saw any violence between them, But that's what I did see, those sorts of things. And, obviously other people as well like that. It was done in a very sort of vindictive way. And but and I'd go home and tell my parents about it, those sorts of things. And they would be like, whatever. And then that would be the end of it until next time. And so that's how it became normalized as well. And I know one of my aunts was, when she gave birth, for example, to one of my cousins, like she developed asthma because as soon as she'd given birth, she was expected to go back to housework. In them days, you had to wash clothes by hand, hang them out in the garden, all of those types of things. And I think she picked up illnesses that then developed into like asthma problems and stuff like that. And that was coming from her mother-in-law, who would have been my gran. And I loved my gran. But because obviously my gran loved me, she spoilt me and so on. Now I look back and I think, God, look how these women were treated by their in-laws. And from that perspective, I don't think a lot has changed today. Yes, women are much more vocal. Yes, they're not putting up with rubbish like that. They're standing up for themselves. But that doesn't mean to say that abuse has reduced as well at the same time. I don't think that's the case.
You're saying that we've analysed our lives and we're saying that it's continuing on. Why hasn't that cycle broken, do you think? Why is it still continuing? And why aren't we if we see something and we spot it and saying, oh, actually that's going on, we should step in? What is stopping us from the change?
I think part of it is to do with that we've encouraged our daughters and women in our community to excel, to give them, say that you are empowered, you can do this, that you are capable and able, and you have the right to be able to do all of this. But I think our communities failed to work with their sons, and their sons now are struggling with this rise in empowerment in women. And it's not just in our community, this is across the board. And I think that men think that because women have become more empowered, that they've become emasculated, that they're no longer men, because now women don't need men to look after them or to work for them, to feed them and all of that. And I think we haven't done enough work with our men to say that you should be, encouraging your partner. I mean, obviously we're talking about heterosexual relationships and there are others, but, we're not telling our sons to do that. And also there's this, I don't know if you've heard this term, the devouring mother. I don't know if you've heard that term before. If you haven't, look it up. And I think it's like a psychological term. And there's the empowering mother is somebody who's very much controls, particularly her son. And is that to do with the relationship that she has with her son? And especially where maybe she doesn't have a really great relationship with her husband, where she's able to have conversations and talk to him about general stuff, fun stuff, gossip, or about the family and so on. So she almost replaces him with the son. Yeah. So they have this, not saying sexualized relationship, but an intimate relationship where he's the person that she goes to. So in then comes this other woman who now has become the focus of the attention of her son. And she finds that very, very difficult to deal with. And then that's where that sort of animosity between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law also takes place. So, I mean, that's one aspect of it. I'm sure there are lots of other reasons as well, but I think it's really interesting that this is still ongoing. And I mean, I always say probably about 90% of people that I know and talk to, women, have negative things to say about their mother-in-laws, or comments about how they've been treated, or how she makes things difficult for them, she interferes. And it's not so much the men that these women will talk about, like their father-in-law and brother-in-law, but it is mainly the mother-in-law and the sister-in-law that they will talk about. And I've seen the real extreme lengths that some women will go to ruin and destroy their daughter-in-laws. I've seen that. Not to mention Sergeant Atwell, who back in the was murdered because her mother-in-law and husband set the whole thing up in India. And I think I read yesterday or the day before, I think she's passed away. I mean, no loss to this world, if we look at it, But I think she went to prison, didn't she? And then she was released because she became quite ill. I think she had dementia, and I think in this last week she's died as well. But that's the extreme side of it. And there are lots of women who do play out that extreme side of it. I've heard some really horrific stories, probably that too horrific to even talk about on
Me and Val are nodding away because we're like, yep, we know what you're talking about. We've talked to peers and everyone's going through the same thing. But do you think now women are becoming empowered? And I've heard it being said as well, women are becoming empowered and they don't need men anymore. And that's why more divorces are happening. What do you think about that?
I think women don't put up with rubbish anymore, and I think they are empowered. But being empowered doesn't mean that you don't want a relationship or that you don't want intimacy in your life or connection in your life. As human beings, if you look at it from a humanistic perspective, we all need it. We're born with a need for attachment, to somebody, because that's what makes us safe and secure. So we need people around us. We need a network. We need a family as human beings, because that sort of feeds, like I said, a need in our brains, in our bodies, everything. So I don't think it's a case of that women no longer need men. Women need good men who support them, who understand, who are equal to them. And that means equal in the home, in the care of the home, and then bringing up the children, and have respect for them. There's no reason why women wouldn't want to be with men, again, in heterosexual relationships, if all of that was available to them. And like I said, women have evolved and developed and grown and become more empowered. There's a lot of men out there who haven't caught up yet, and the expectations are that she will treat me and behave towards me how my mother did. So cook all my food, do all my washing.
Mother, basically.
Yeah, mother him, regardless of how much she has to do. Women are now, yes, empowered, and they go out and work and earn money, sometimes more than the men. But they still have to come home and be the housewife, the dutiful daughter-in-law, and all those things. And I think that's largely a problem, I think, across the board. And there's an expectation that women should behave in a certain way, and the Andrew Tates of this world, they're the ones that are promoting these sort of prescribed roles for women.
Just on that point, I mean, it's an interesting one. We had a podcast a while ago, and I got one of my friends to listen to it, and he said something that was really interesting, his take on it from a man's perspective. And it's like, well, actually, the sort of the powers that be are still lie with men. And we will, I know, talking about it's sort of the opposite of, we want to talk about the strides that women have made, and we'll do that towards the end of the podcast, because I do still want to pick up on the fact that we sort of do still pull each other down, which is a massive problem within, especially this sector, but in life. And I definitely want to touch on that. But what he said was that those spheres of power still lie with men. So if men were to then allow women to, and they understood the journey that women have taken to get to where they have got to, why would it be in their advantage to help women sort of it become a bit of a competition? Essentially, men still have the power within their hands. If we look at a lot of CEOs, they're mainly men. I can't remember the last time I read. I think it's still a very, very low percentage where you've got women that are CEOs.
Yeah.
Political power. If we look at the US elections, I mean, it's very much male orientated. Why would men help in society to lift women up?
I think it's about educating men and telling them and helping them to understand that helping women means helping you. I think they see it as competition, like you said. They worry about women taking over, but I don't think women want to take over. I think they want equality. They want equity, which is true equity. Women want to be treated as respected. They want to be, I mean, I don't think any woman wants to be in a position just because she's a woman. Some people are going out there saying, oh, well, she's only recruited to that role because it's a quota, they say about people of color, don't they? They're only in that position because they fit a quota. Nobody wants that. We all got our own self-respect, and we want to be in positions because we deserve to be in those positions. But there's a real problem with unconscious bias. I've sat in meetings before and I've had people say, well, yeah, that woman there, she's really great, but ultimately she's just a woman. She's going to find it really difficult to work in this field because it's very male dominated. And so why would you make that assumption that a woman can't deal with that? And that's the issue here. There's a lot of bias here, whether it's unconscious or obvious. In some cases, obviously, it's obvious, isn't it? I think there's a lot of that. And I think, men need to understand that women aren't here to take over as such. They're there because they want a balance, they want equality, they want their voice to be heard and understood and taken seriously. Because men, sorry to say, men are men, and their first and foremost thought isn't for women. But women think very differently. They think about everyone, and men will think about themselves. I mean, you talk about CEOs and stuff. I mean, I remember reading that, a man, when they looks at a job that becomes available, that they will only need to be able to do 25% of what's in the job description, and they say, right, I'm applying for it.
Yeah.
Women will look at it and they've got to do at least 75% of that and understand it before they even think about applying. And that's the mindset difference that we have. Men will go for it because they've been told all their lives that they can. That's the difference. You've grown up knowing you can achieve anything. Women are told growing up, well, actually, you need to stay in your lane, or your role is this. When you grow up, you're going to get married and have children. And that's what we've been reduced to.
Sahdaish, I ask the question again then. Yeah. It does, essentially, you've said it yourself, within the work role, if there is it would end up being a competition. So why should men help lift women up? Not only in the household, but also professionally as well. What's in it for them?
Well, I think exactly what I was saying. I think they need to understand that women, basically they have value, they've got something to add, they come from different perspective. If a man really believes, and that's the difference, for a man, they have to be in a position, first of all, because we can't force men to do anything that they don't want to do. But if we bring them up to be fair and equal or equitable people, like, human beings, to say, yeah, we need to ensure that everyone is heard, then that man is not going to be worried about a woman coming on board, because, they would understand that woman isn't there to take over his role. If she deserves it, absolutely she will, but like, they're there to support. They're there to add value to what they're doing. But we have to get men into that position where they understand that. Otherwise it won't happen, because I think there's too much ego at play. They're like, there's the way that they think about women, and around the world we know that women are treated second-class citizens all their life. I mean, even in America, like, if you heard some politicians, they, referring to women, pregnant women, as host bodies, when they say things like that, you think, what do you mean host body? That's a woman, it's a human being. And they're referring almost like they're not human. Do you know what I mean? And when you've got people talking like that, and they're our political leaders around the world,
it normalizes it, doesn't it?
It feeds into the younger generation, and obviously some will play into that, won't they?
Do you think us as women need to, because I've had certain circumstances where I've been in a place where it's male dominated, and I remember there was a shouting match, and I stood my ground, and for that I got respected by all the men in the room, because I stood my ground rather than shying away and being like, whatever you say. Do you think we need to prove ourselves more than our counterparts, men, need to, in situations?
Oh, absolutely, we do. And like, it's great that you stood up for yourself, and it's really important that you did. And I think maybe they got to a point where they realized, well, they're not going to be able to push you out of the conversation, so they had to respect you. And that's really unfair. They put people like that, put women in these positions where they have to really, like, force themselves to put themselves in, like, quite difficult, uncomfortable positions. And that's not what it should be about. And you stood up for yourself. Great. That's brilliant. But they had to respect you from that perspective. There was no other choice. But somebody else might not have been empowered as you, and therefore that behavior is not right. It's unfair, and whoever it was might have shied away from it and thought, right, this is not worth my time, or maybe would have become scared, and so on. So
okay, Sahdaish, let's flip it the other way. The other comment that you made earlier.
Yeah.
Well, we've already got a bit of a tough situation in society where we've got to prove ourselves to ourselves, if nothing else, before we get ahead. Yeah. Let's go the other way now. We've all had the experience of women versus women, and we've had it ourselves. And you sort of come out of a situation thinking, oh my God, like, what just happened there?
Yeah.
Why is there that competition in that case?
Yeah, I think I've thought about this a lot. And I think that women play into the patriarchy as well. Like, look, at the end of the day, there is only so much space for everyone. And most of it, like, we've just been talking about, is dominated by men. And the thing is, because if you are then, and this is about habit and about behavior and stuff. And I think that, when women get into positions of power, they know that there's only very small space for that. And so what they do is they will lift the ladder up, because otherwise it's me or you, right?
Yeah.
Because there's only one space or two spaces. And so to protect themselves, they'll push other women out. And I think like that in some cases that plays out. And I think like, I mean, I don't know what else. Women can be we too can be very vindictive, and we can be our own worst enemy. And there are power struggles there as well. And whether this is because of that reason about space, there isn't a lot of space. And then when you're a woman of color, there's even less space for you, And so it's about self-preservation almost. And
do you think it's justified in that case?
Oh no,
women don't help each other then?
Because it's terrible for the person on the receiving end. It's terrible for them, isn't it? I'm not saying it's justified. I'm just trying to think of reason why.
No, the reason I asked that question, Sahdaish, is because that is a massive point. If there is only space for one or two people and you've got there, why would you help someone else to knock you out? You've just sort of shot yourself in the foot. So I agree. I think that's a really big point. And you're right. When you've got a woman of colour, that there's even less space there. It's a really hard maneuver then for both parties then, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, but you have to make that conscious decision, don't you? Do you want to be part of that, system, or do you want to make your own? That's why when you guys reached out to me for support, I've never turned a woman away. It doesn't matter to me, like whether it means that it's late at night, weekend, because I don't believe in that system. I think that we can all achieve and we can all find a space and a voice for ourselves. So if somebody comes to me and says, I'm setting up a service or I want help with something, I've never said no to anybody. If I can help anywhere, I will. I mean, other than the fact that 24 hours in a day, so I can't produce any more time.
In the morning, hello.
Yeah, women, we can do it.
Yeah, but because part of it is to do with my faith. I believe in in Sikhi, and part of that has always been, since I was a kid, like my parents taught me that you do for others, like and it will Vaheguru will look after you. That's what my parents used to say. Doing seva is important, because if somebody needs help, coming to you for a reason. That's how it's always been. So that's me growing up, like even as a going to infant school, like I remember fundraising for children. So that's really ingrained in me, that I probably would have always done charity work, generally work for services or charities or for people, because that's what my parents taught me. And I do find it really difficult to say no, but also like if somebody does well, we should celebrate. And that's how I see it. Of course, we all want to do well. We all want to be in a space where our voice is being heard, and it's not easy. But ultimately, when you're on the receiving end of that toxicity, which, like I said, does exist, it's difficult. And sometimes people have been through their own stuff. And I have to, in the end, just tell myself that, okay, well, I don't know what experience they've had, what life they've lived, why they are angry in this way, or why they behave in this way.
Was Taj angry when she contacted you?
No, of course not. What I mean is those that are toxic. Yeah. Taj has always been very calm.
Help me now.
Taj has always come across as very calm and collected. No, it's a really good quality to have. But like and that's how I see it. I've not lived in somebody else's shoes, so I can't. I can't decide in my head. Like if I do, I'd go crazy. How many people can you keep thinking, why are they behaving like this?
Why is it important to help other women? Why is that so important for us?
I think if we're a true feminist, and I think if we truly believe in helping people, that includes help. You can't sit in a sector and say, well, I'm here to support these victims or survivors of domestic abuse or sexual violence, all of that, and then not help the woman next to you.
That's a good
what I mean? That's how I see it. If it means, if I help her and it lifts her to be ahead of me, then so be it. Because that's what true feminism is about, isn't it? True sisterhood. That's my belief. You can't work. I always say this. That's why every time when I work with people, like my staff, for example, my first and foremost message is that I need you to be well. This is not just all, obviously you have to like pull up staff who are not performing and things like that. But ultimately, my first and foremost, primary focus is them and their health and well-being, because without that, they can't do their job properly. And I always thought, I've always given staff flexibility, because as women, it's very different for us. We have our children, understand that we have got all of these other roles and hats that we have to wear. So as a woman, I understand that. So I give them that flexibility. So, whether it's flexible working or whether it's, working from home or whatever I've been able to do, because I get it. Somebody's got in-laws who are sick. I know my staff member being the female, even if it's her in-laws, she's going to end up doing the bulk of this, the help, the support and so on. Because we come from that community, don't we? Yeah. So then I will give that flexibility. I understand, but not everybody does. But that's how I see it. Then you're not a true feminist. You're not truly there to help people if you can't help those that sit on the side of you. Those women who.
How do you draw the line of? Because you said you're a very yes person.
Yeah.
As are we, to be honest. How do we know that we're not being taken for a ride? How do you draw that line and the boundaries?
Yeah, I think you give, and I'm not saying you just give like, blindly. I think like, you do what you can. You have to look after yourself, because if I'm not well, then that's the way you draw the line, because you've got to say, right, if I'm not well, then I can't help others. But also at the same time, when people take the mickey, then you have to have your own self-respect and to yourself, well, okay, like I'm not stupid at the same time. You have to stick up for yourself, and ultimately you have to decide when it's time to step away. So that's how you do it. You give because you want to give. If people are grateful or not grateful, that's on them. Like if you truly want to do seva, you do it because you do it of free will, like you're giving something because you want to give it, not because you're going to get something in return. That's not true seva, is it? And in sisterhood, as a family, as a network of women, it's exactly the same. We give because we're supportive, not because we want them to, praise us or to reward us or anything. We appreciate you guys like saying that you're grateful. But I did it because I wanted to give it, not because I thought, I'm going to get something in return for it. And that's my conscience. My conscience is clear in that sense. So that's how I see it. And if people are taking the mickey, I'll soon realize, and then obviously I will draw a line at that point. But that's on them, not on me.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting question, because I think there is, you said it in jest of I'm not stupid, but actually if you're kind up to a certain point, people do take advantage, and that's where it's like, come on. I just want to bring it back, because obviously this episode is for International Women's Day, and you've already covered the theme itself, which is give to gain, and that's been really very much highlighted in that second section there. Let's now also talk about the changes and the positives of where we were a decade ago to where we are now, because we've covered the challenges, and there's 1,000 more challenges that we haven't covered in this podcast. But we're actually, society has been against us, men, women, we've had it tough.
Yeah.
But what are the sort of milestones over the last decade that women have had, and where are we now in 2026?
I mean, I think like, I love seeing like particularly South Asian women in politics, in positions of leadership, where they bring so much versatility and everything that women have experienced to the forefront, to make change, to sort of change policy, and to lift the community and educate others and empower others. I love that. And I think like women are now in a position where they, if they want to, they can pretty much do anything. We had, obviously it was a male prime minister, but we had a South Asian male prime minister in this country. And I think, a South Asian woman could do it, and I think women in general can do it. And I love seeing the fact that in government today, how many more women there are now in politics than there was like 20 years ago, for example, even 10 years ago. I was reading, because I did the Joe Cox leadership program, and you have to read some books for that. I was reading about, women back then in the 80s, and how there was like probably a handful of women who, were trying to make change. for women. And I think that that's been brilliant. The movement has helped things like pregnancy rights, women's rights, in the workplace, for example. That's happened because women have stepped forward and demanded change. And I think that's really, really important. But I think, generally speaking, I think we can. I mean, we are the only ones holding ourselves back. The whole imposter syndrome and so on. And I mean, I'm 52 now, so I think if I was in my mind now, the position I'm in my mind now, but it was 20 years ago, I was 20 years younger, in other words. Like,
oh, that'd be fantastic. I'm having a whole thing right now.
I would be aspiring to be up there, like, now. I mean, like I said, I'm 52, so, I have to think about, like, what is it that I'm going to focus my next 15, 20 years of work life on. I have to think like that, because I've done 30 years. I've done bulk of my work life, haven't I, already? I've already delivered that. So I've got probably another 15, 20 years to go, and I have to really think about this. Hence my Kaur Lab thing, that I set that up, because now it's time. I thought I've done the crisis intervention, I've done the supporting of women like in crisis. Now it's time for change, isn't it? We want to, we keep firefighting, we're constantly firefighting. I now need to do things where I can influence change and policy and legislation, and raise the voice of those women who in the future, when I'm not here, will benefit from that. That's what I want to do. And I think, we are now in a place where we can do that. We are being heard. Yes, there's more to do. There's probably still not enough of it. I did a survey the last 3 months of 2025 about racism and women's experience of racism, which, I launched that report for Race Equality Week on the 2nd of February. And women, there's so many women out there who still experiencing huge levels of racism. And obviously, you know about the cases of racially motivated rapes that have happened here in the West Midlands. And that's what really sort of triggered me to do the survey. The survey on racism wasn't something I was going to do. It wasn't my plan. But when those things happened and other women were also racially attacked, I thought, well, I can do this. And that's where I think women are. Like, that you literally can just think, well, hold on, that needs to be dealt with. I'm going to deal with it. The whole thing about, when I read an article in the papers about girls being aborted here in the UK, and organisations and charities talking about it like it's nothing. And I thought, oh, hold on a minute, we've heard about this for years, haven't we? That this is happening in our families. People do abort female. This is not right. So it doesn't take much now. Email to the right people in government, email the charity that's doing this work. And, I've had some responses, I'm waiting on other responses. But I will look into this. And I think that's where we are now, that we are in a position where we can basically, if we believe that we can influence change, we can do that. We can influence it. And I will raise it, and I will look at it from, an honour-based abuse perspective or a gender-based violence perspective. And I will highlight this at government level, where then hopefully it will get written into some legislation, or there will be challenges of people doing this, because that's where we need to be. We need to stop people aborting female children, because there's an anomaly. Like, everybody talks about India, but this data that's coming out now shows there's a problem here in the UK, and they don't say it's Sikh or Hindu or what, they say it's Indian. And the community we come from, we're all from the Sikh community. We know it's a problem in our Punjabi community as well. So I think that's where people, women can take any career that they want now. That's where they are if they choose to do so.
How do we encourage our young girls and boys to think forward and positive about women and help women in society?
Yeah, I think it's about education. This is about, people talk about it all the time now, don't they? They talk about education in schools, for example, and I think there's not enough of it. There's not enough taught around healthy relationships, and not just intimate relationships, but relationships with your peers, with other school. If you can start at a really young age, and I'm talking primary school, and that's why, like, I designed board games which were starting to go into schools, and been doing it for about 4 or 5 years, and sometimes other things take over, so that gets put on the back burner because I'm focused on other things. But but talking to children and having child-friendly, challenging conversations is really important, and even more now because we know like that teenagers, like the most reported form of abuse in teenage relationships now is strangulation.
Yeah.
And it's because they're looking at rubbish on pornography on phones, mobile phones and things like that. And I'm glad like this conversation's happening about whether, children under the age of 16 have access to social media. But by the time kids have left primary school, something like 75% have basically seen pornography. That's 11 years old.
That's crazy.
And that is that they're being influenced by that because they're not getting sex education from their school. They're getting it from these pornography sites, and they don't realize in themselves that actually what they're doing and displaying is abusive behavior. So that's why you've got to start really young now. You've got to start talking to children about bullying, about equality, racism. We need to have those conversations.
Sahdaish, as we come to the end of this podcast, give us, just summarize 3 things that we as individuals can do to keep on pushing, breaking that glass ceiling, essentially.
Yeah.
Just 3 things what we can do individually.
It depends which perspective you're coming from. As parents, that we can encourage our kids to do whatever they want to do and not box them up. Our community is very good at like lawyers, accountants, barristers and all of this, and my family are a family of creatives. So
I thought you could say of doctors. I was like, Sahdaish.
No. No, we're creative. So, my kids have gone into like film and media and, what they enjoy doing. And I think that we need to stop boxing our children in. Of course, I know it comes from a place of love and affection. They want their children to do well and earn lots of money and things like that. Money isn't everything at the end of the day. And I think and again, that's come from a mindset. You come here to work to, probably our parents sent money back home. And that's what that was about. But we're not there now. We can change that mindset. So it's about, encouraging, not just allowing, but encouraging your children to take a path that they want to take and in their choice, their aspirations, their talents and abilities. Lots of parents have squashed that in their children by forcing them to go down a path that they didn't want to do. I think that's really important. I think lift your sisters, and I'm talking your sisters outside there in the community. I think that's really important to give back and encourage them. If you can mentor, if you're doing well, if you can mentor someone else, open yourself up to doing that, because it is really rewarding as well at the same time to see someone else doing well. So if you're doing well for yourself, give something back, I would say, and do that. Take time out. And it's not a lot. Having an hour-long conversation once a month is not, it's not a lot, is it? I mean, you spend more than that time scrolling on your social media. I've done that and I look at it and I think, oh my God, what could I have done in that hour?
You don't realise till the end of the hour, you're like, damn it.
yeah, exactly. Because you're not going to get that time back. So you use it to support others. It is brilliant. And lifting someone else means that, that they too are able to achieve their dreams. So you're not just doing something for yourself, but for someone else as well.
Give me one more, Sahdaish. So you've said I need one more. Come on.
I think for yourself, you've got to look after yourself. There is so much out there. Take time out for yourself. And I'm not saying everybody says to me, go for a massage, they say things like that. My family, my sisters do, that you need to take time out and get a facial done and so on and so forth.
And you're like, there's only 24 hours.
No, for me, it's about learning, but learning like how to help myself. We all have it. It doesn't matter how empowered you are. Things happen in your life that really push you back, that send you on that path of, sometimes feeling low, experiencing depression, anxiety, all those things. And especially when you get to my age, then you got menopause, which means, that you even without negative experiences, anxiety sets in, doesn't it? Because the hormonal change and so on. So I think to help yourself, learn things, talk to people, there's so much information out there. I listen to podcasts. I listen to people like you, like when I'm doing my house. If I don't feel like music, that's what I do. Or, listen to you. There's so much inspirational information out there that helps lift you. So give yourself focus as well and think about you, your dreams, your wishes, your aspirations, and and move forward that way. I think that's got to be the final thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Sahdaish. It's, you know, I've already said it, you've been fantastic as part of the Changing Suits journey as well, and we really appreciate it. And you've given some fantastic advice on International Women's Day 2026, everybody. Have a lovely day, and we'll catch up soon, I'm sure.
Thanks a lot. See you. Bye-bye.
That's goodbye from me.
And that's goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.